In tonight's in-depth coverage, I'm addressing the elephants in the room. The Oklahoma state government is controlled by Republicans, but cracks are starting to become more visible, not just between the executive branch, but also between the legislature and the governor. Last week, some very public statements were made that could show we could be in for a long 2 years as we prepare for the 2026 election. As Taylor Swift so famously sings, "Baby, now we got bad blood."
I really think that's it. I think it's a personal hatred of me.
Despite Republicans being in control, personal politics are starting to show at the state capitol.
I have no ill feelings towards him or anybody in this building, but I'm going to keep doing what I think is right for Oklahomans.
Senate President Pro Tem Greg Treat accused Governor Kevin Stitt of, quote, putting a target on his back and pointed to the disproportionate number of Senate bills being vetoed this session.
It all kind of devolved last April or May. He had been siding with the House the entirety of the time on the school choice debate.
Stitt says the bills are bad policy, and he also would have vetoed them had they started in the House, where Stitt's policies are more easily passed in favor.
We're not vetoing Senate bills or House bills. What's the difference? They both are voting on them.
But the fighting isn't just between the Senate and the governor.
You connect the dots, there's some stuff that looks weird.
Last week, after an audit accused Stitt of running a no-bid contract state and said State Tourism Secretary Shelley Zumwalt funneled millions of dollars during the pandemic to her husband's company, Stitt accused State Auditor Cindy Byrd and Attorney General Gentner Drummond of smearing him for future political gains.
You know, you've got an AG that's already said he's running for governor. You've got an auditor who's running for lieutenant governor. And within an hour, we got no notice. The House didn't get any notice. Within an hour, they've coordinated their press statements.
An attorney general's opinion released earlier this year also caused Stitt's cabinet to have multiple resignations when the attorney general said cabinet secretaries could not lead the state agencies they oversee. There are also clear policy differences when it comes to things like the tribes, like this comment Drummond made about Stitt during an interview with me last year.
I think in this instance, the governor doesn't pass an opportunity to be acrimonious with the tribes.
Between the squabbles, it's clear that a supermajority doesn't mean a guaranteed super easy time getting policies across the finish line. One bill caught up in this alleged infighting is about domestic violence, and it had bipartisan support in both chambers. The bill, known as the Survivors Act, would allow judges to consider a person's history of abuse during sentencing. The legislation is intended to provide leniency for individuals convicted of a crime who are also victims of domestic abuse.
I'm appalled that the governor vetoed that. It's about domestic violence survivors who commit some crime related to that domestic violence incident or lifetime of domestic violence.
Everybody should be shocked and really understand this bill. This basically would have said that any crime, currently somebody that's in prison for bad stuff, rape, murder, whatever, could go back and say that there was some kind of psychological issue that happened 20 years ago in their past, and so they should have a different sentence today.
The Senate overrode Stitt's veto, and it's up to the State House to decide if the bill will become law over the governor's objections. One bill we are going to watch to see how bad this infighting really is a bill named after the Pro Tem's son in connection to a recent car accident he was involved in. Here is video of that intense crash caught on a sheriff's deputy's dash cam.
I don't want nothing to show.
Greg Treat's son Mason was pulled over for not having a tag on a car he bought through a private sale, which is perfectly legal right now. During that traffic stop, a driver fell asleep and plowed into the deputy and Treat's son. The bill hopes to address many issues in state law since license plate laws were changed 4 years ago.
I don't typically get emotional about car tags, but as you all know, on January 5th, our life was turned upside down. I ask you to vote for this bill. I can't talk about it.
Members, that concludes debate. Vote now occur. If you favor the measure, vote aye. If you oppose the measure, vote nay.
The bill has bipartisan support in both houses and is likely to head to the governor's desk. We will wait to see what Stitt does directly with a bill named directly after the Pro Tem's son if this infighting really is personal. While the governor and the state Senate are at odds, there is still a budget standoff underway between the House and the Senate. Earlier this month, the state Senate stopped hearing any of the House's budget bills, saying, quote, they were operating in darkness. The Senate started crafting their own version of the budget last Christmas, and it passed in March. It's the earliest a budget was ever passed in decades, if in the history of the state Senate. The incoming Speaker of the House says the House is transparent, and they just not in the way the Senate is.
It is our conviction in the Senate that we started at the beginning to shine light on the budget process. And if you go dark in the middle of that process, the entire process goes dark.
This happens a lot when it comes to the budget process, and sometimes there's some disagreement, which at the end of the day, if we agreed on everything, that would not be good government. We need to disagree and but at the end of the day, you got to find ways to find commonality and get a budget across the finish line.
Governor Kevin Stitt says he will veto the bill if it adds or grows government too much. Lawmakers have until the end of May to get a budget done. We are also going to keep an eye on the immigration bill that passed last week that is now sitting on Governor Kevin Stitt's desk. It makes illegal immigration a state-level crime. The governor has until tomorrow to sign, veto, or the bill becomes law without his signature. One of those three things. Legislative leaders, Stitt and A.G. Drummond, all want this bill. We're going to look at the way they celebrate, if it's together or if they release individual statements and then just move on with life.